Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 171. Now, we are joined today by a very, very special guest who I'll introduce you to in a minute. It's actually his third visit with us. Kind of all the kind of conversations we've had have been on a similar theme, but this is going to be a really interesting conversation and a really positive conversation as well, which is going to be great. But before I introduce you to our guest, let me just check in with Mr. Peter Lant. How are you doing, Pete?
I'm doing very well. We haven't spoke about this yet. I didn't mention this, but I'm nearly there. I've got 147,000 steps left to do, and I've got me 6 million for the year. So
excellent. So is that
well with today as well?
Is that ahead of schedule? Are you ahead of the kind of?
Because I said I would do 6 million this year, so I'll be done. I'll do 140,000 by next week.
So potentially, then you could be done before the start of December.
Oh, easy, yeah. I'll be done. What is it? 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. Like I'll be done by the 23rd or something. So I'm definitely going to get 6.5 million. I was going to aim for 7, but then actually that's like it was like 22 or 23,000 steps a day when I've been averaging 18. So it's a bit more. Yeah. So in December as well, but I might. We'll see.
6.5 million sounds good.
It's honestly, it's been brilliant doing that this year. I've loved it.
Excellent. Well, we are joined, obviously, it's myself and Pete today, and we are joined for the third time by Chris Branch. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm really well, thanks. I'm really chuffed to be back and excited to be talking about happier topics today. So yeah, really pleased to be back.
Yeah, so if you are, I know we are getting some new listeners and some people have been speaking to me recently who've kind of recently found the podcast and are listening now. But Chris has been on with us twice before in fairly recent times, actually. So the 2 episodes Chris has been on before, episode 145 and episode 149. And you can very, very easily find those now on healthoddity.com because we've got every single episode on there in audio and in video as well. If you want to go back and listen to those, which I probably would recommend you do. I mean, you will obviously get a lot from this episode as a standalone as well, because I'm sure it's going to be fascinating. But if you do want to go back and listen to episodes 145 and episodes 149 with Chris, then that would be really good, because that would probably kind of set up and tee up this episode and what we're going to be talking about. And it will really kind of, it's almost like a trilogy. This is closing out the trilogy, I suppose, on this particular topic. And I'm sure we'll speak to Chris again around other things. But yeah, Chris, so when we spoke to you last time, we were kind of unpacking a 100-mile run attempt that you did, which was ultimately, I suppose, unsuccessful in hitting the initial goal you started out from, but you learned a hell of a lot from it. So yeah, do you want to kind of tell us a little bit about what's been going on with you since that last episode? Because I know when we spoke, you said, you were kind of processing everything still. It was very early on after the last one. And then kind of what happened to your mindset, and then how did you decide to move forward, and what did you decide to do on the back of the last attempt? If we can start from there.
Yeah, well, I started the year with the strong goal of trying to achieve a 100-mile race. And that's where you and I have spoken twice. And the first one was building the preparation for the attempt. And then second one, I'd just done it, and there were quite a few factors involved that meant that I couldn't do it. And it really knocked me for quite a while, actually, more than I was expecting at the time. And I figured I'd always planned after that race to move slightly away from long distance stuff for the rest of the year. So that race was in June, and I'd intended to have a bit of a strength block between then and Christmas. And I started that. So in the mid-June, I went into some more strength training, started to build a bit of muscle back. That continued through till about late August. And I was really enjoying myself, feeling really good about it. and I have a big race in the diary in May 2024, and that was it. I was just going to leave my long distance escapades until next year. And I walked into a coffee shop just to go and treat myself to a coffee, got chatting to someone, and they told me about a 100-mile race around a running track. And it just landed in my brain as a very bizarre but interesting and intriguing thing to do. And I left that coffee shop having signed up to a 100-mile race. So
could I ask, did you know this person that you bumped? Was it just total stranger you had this conversation with?
I did know this person. Yeah,
okay.
they are in the they are in the ultra running community. So but I had no idea that I was going to walk into the coffee shop that day and start talking about ultras and leave having booked a 100-mile race. I've read about track long distance stuff in a book called The Rise of the Ultra Runners, which is if anyone's interested in getting into long distance running, it's definitely a book I recommend. And in that book, he does a track 24-hour race, which is run as far as you can in 24 hours. The race he did was called Self-Transcendence. And it's called that because there's a point in the race that he spoke about, which is where people just seem to transcend beyond the physical challenge of it, and it almost becomes a spiritual journey. And he wrote really beautifully about it, and it always kind of was something in the back of my mind that I thought if I had the opportunity to try that, I'd give it a go. So when I had failed the first 100-mile attempt, it's still in the same calendar year. It feels like I had some real unfinished business with the 100-mile distance. And I remember reading this book. When I heard about the track 100, it just landed. So I signed up to it. So that was 2 weeks ago, and this time around, thankfully, I was successful.
So I suppose where was the location of the race?
It was Huntingdon near Cambridge. It's one of those things where it just doesn't matter because once you're on the track, there's nothing else there. And I think deliberately he chose a track that just, I guess from a cost perspective as well, it wasn't a big track with a big stadium or anything. It was just a very typical council track with not a lot there. And logistically, it makes it quite easy from a race perspective. You just take your box of food and spare clothing and take a little camping chair, put it down by the side, and once you're on the track, you're there for the next little while.
The reason I asked was because I saw you've done a fantastic YouTube kind of summary of it, which we'll probably share on our Facebook and all the rest of it. But I watched that obviously yesterday, I think, prior to coming on with you, and the track. We'll get to it. I know, because I don't want to kind of jump ahead, but there was a bit in the video where you're running and you see like a sunrise. And it did just look like the track was in the middle of nowhere, because there was no buildings on the horizon. There was no nothing blocking the horizon. You literally it looked really like remote, really kind of open, and really, like you say, almost spiritual, that you were just in the middle of nowhere on this running track going through. That's why that's the only reason I ask about the location.
I thought your Strava was funny on Instagram as well. I think you posted that on, and it's literally just that.
I know.
For ages, and then obviously you can't see it, but then it goes that way, doesn't it?
There was one change of direction at 12 hours, which that gave us all a real lift. Yeah.
I was talking to Sean, my missus, last night about this, about chatting to you today and what you'd done. And she was really concerned. She was like, well, you have one leg shorter than the other if they've just done it like one way. She was concerned that you didn't turn around.
Some people felt the change of direction. I didn't. And the way I explain it is, you're not racing a 400-meter race. You're not leaning into a corner. So you're plodding around the corner. But having said that, some people did feel it in their hips a little bit. It took them a while to adjust once they'd changed direction, but it wasn't too much of a problem for me, thankfully.
Yeah, and I was just training just before coming back and jumping on the call. I was training Edith, friend of the show. I've mentioned a lot, and we're just doing some training. And I said that I was talking to you this afternoon and what you've done. And yeah, I think that's the thing, which hopefully I know we'll talk about during this conversation, because she sort of said, well, I'm sure I don't want to minimize how much of a physical achievement it is, but doing that round a 400-meter track must be the mindset, the mental resilience, the kind of resolve. And I know that you also said in the video you weren't allowed any headphones or any kind of external stuff going on while you were running. So it's really just you and your thoughts and the track. So I know we'll talk about that. I mean, in terms of your preparation for this one, how did you feel when you kind of rocked up to the start and when you arrived there? Were you optimistic? Were you confident? Did you think, yeah, I'm going to nail it this time? I mean, what was your thought process going into it?
I felt slightly underprepared. And so what I was banking on was that I did a lot of training leading up to my first 100-mile attempt. And the thing that helps you achieve from a physical perspective, the thing that helps you achieve these long distances is having a good aerobic base. Building an aerobic base takes a long time. It's really quite comparable to the sort of strength training you guys do, like proper strength, not bodybuilding, hypertrophy, but real strength takes a long time to build up, but it kind of lasts a long time as well once you've got true strength. And aerobic fitness is similar. So I was banking on the fact that for the first half of this year, I really nailed it. Then I went into that strength block that I spoke to you about and felt great. And then suddenly I booked the race and I thought, right, I'll get back into my running again, but I was still kind of enjoying the strength training. And then life got busy and I never quite hit my running training as much as I would like. So about a month out from this track 100, I suddenly got very nervous and I wasn't feeling confident at all. I was just banking on the facts that physically it would have been much easier than the 100-mile I did attempt in terms of the terrain, because it was just flat as opposed to hilly. And hopefully I'd built up enough of an aerobic base where I wasn't doing no running. I was still building up. I did a Chelmsford Marathon in preparation, ran that as a nice steady training run and ran that in sub 4. So that kind of gave me an idea that, okay, my fitness is okay. What was also good after the Chelmsford Marathon was I didn't ache the next day. So I went to work and really felt pretty good. So that was giving me a little clue that my body was okay, but my numbers in my training volume just were nowhere near what they were earlier in the year. So part of my brain was very worried that my numbers weren't there. Another part of my brain was thinking, I actually feel pretty good. I can run Chelmsford Marathon in a sub 4 and feel fine. So that's not being unfit. So I just didn't know how to feel. I didn't feel very certain about the outcome.
And in terms of strategy, because I think you mentioned on the video that you had a kind of a pace in mind that you were going to go out, and you were kind of rigid and you stuck to this pace. And you said, I think initially there are people kind of everyone passed you, everyone was running past you, and you were just kind of really sticking to this pace that you'd set out. So what was the pace that you decided on, and how difficult did you find it to keep to that pace once you started, and once everyone's passing you, and did you kind of question your strategy, or were you secure and definite in your mind that this was the right thing that you were doing?
So by sheer luck, I listened to a Rich Roll podcast where he was interviewing the female world record holder for both track 100 mile and track 24 hour. And she has a strategy. She's really cool to listen to. She had a strategy where she sets her heart rate to 130 beats a minute for the first 80 miles. And then she says she turns into a savage. And she just starts overtaking people. So lots of people are out in front of her for the first 80 miles, and then she just starts overtaking people. I did not pick up pace, but her 130 beats a minute. So the thing that I go by is heart rate. So when you said I stuck to a pace, actually what I was aiming at was a certain heart rate. I use the Maffetone formula, or at least follow Maffetone's philosophy, where I think your age is relevant in terms of what heart rate you should be aiming at. And it just so happens that the lady that I was listening to on that podcast is a similar age to me. So I kind of figured low 130s, 130 beats a minute. That's probably about right for me, due to my age and where I do my zone training.
Can you just remind people, Chris, the math formula for that?
So the math formula is a way to figure out the top of your aerobic threshold. Another way to say that is the top of your zone 2. And Dr. Phil Maffetone talks about that being 180 minus your age, plus or minus 5 either way, depending on how conditioned you are or how much life stress you have going on. And if you're taking any medications, if you have any pre-existing conditions. So 180 minus your age, plus a little bit if you're really conditioned and really healthy and have low stress, minus a little bit if you're stressed or take medications or have a pre-existing health condition. So that's the top of your aerobic threshold, top of zone 2. For something like a 100-mile run, where for me, I was expecting coming well over 20 hours for this, I was aiming probably at the top of my zone 1, very bottom of my zone 2. And that is a pace that I thought would be sustainable as long as I was eating consistently throughout the race.
Okay, so you started off, like you say, on this 130 was the number, and you were just going to kind of run as slow as you needed to maintain that for, you know, for as long as possible. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I could maintain a fairly consistent pace for about the first 50 to 60 miles, which is where it got interesting because that was daytime. And that was also the longest I'd ever run before, about 11 hours. And so that was the longest I'd ever run in any of my previous ultras. It was daytime. My circadian rhythm felt good with just being upright, moving forwards. The first time it got hard for me was my bedtime, when I would normally be asleep. All day long, I felt good. I remember my watch hitting 50 miles, and I just remember having a little chuckle to myself, thinking, I feel amazingly okay having just covered 50 miles. And I started to get a little bit deluded. In 100-mile running, there's a threshold. If you can do it in under 24 hours, that's pretty good. I was having delusions that I'd be able to do it in under 20 hours because I felt so good at 50 miles. I got this completely deluded mindset of like, oh, wow, I'm on for a really good time here. The night time's going to be fine. and it turns out it wasn't. But up until 50, 60 miles, I felt great.
So, and I think
it was funny because in your video you talk about that, and it really resonated with me because I've done a couple of 2 or 3. I've done one unsuccessful, but a couple of like long walks. I don't necessarily do a lot of running. Walking's a lot more civilized in my yeah. As soon as it gets nighttime, you just want to go to sleep. I was just like, I actually did on one of them. I was going through kind of gates, you know, in fences and stuff like that on public footpaths, and I'd be like resting on the gate like that. So I just put my head on it. And then I'd go, and then I'd come round again. I must have like gone to sleep for like 30 seconds or something. You know, when you're reading a book in bed and you nod off. I was doing that. And then I was like, I need to keep going. I need to not do that. Otherwise I'm going to end up falling asleep in the middle of a field somewhere.
The world's best female ultra runner, Courtney Dauwalter, she's recognized to be the GOAT. And she talks about the 1-minute nap. And she's done this a few times in ultras where when your body really, really needs it, you close your eyes and your body just sucks you in and goes, this is what I need in 1 minute, and then pops you back out again. And you don't feel amazing, but you feel so much better than you did.
Yeah.
That is a strategy.
Did you?
There you go. I discovered that on my
own. Did you? I know you said about the, you know, you have like a picnic chair or a folding chair. You can put on the side of the track. You can put spare clothes, a bag, food, all that stuff there. And I suppose any time that you want, you just pop off to your chair and help yourself. Was there ever a time in the 24 hours where you actually went and sat down on the chair, or did you kind of continually keep moving the whole time? I mean, because I know that even just, I mean, I've done a marathon a number of times, but I know if you actually, even just that distance, if you stop and sit down, getting going is really, really tough again after that. I mean, so did you ever sit down and have a break, or were you kind of perpetually just keeping moving the whole time?
My strategy going into the race was that I was going to treat myself at midnight to sitting down for 5 minutes. But then I started to see more and more people sit down, and I got chatting to this guy, a really nice guy, and he was saying, oh my God, you just got to go sit down for 2 minutes, shake your legs out, and it'll really refresh you. So he gave me this idea, and I went and sat down, a little bit later, he'd dropped out because his legs were so sore. So I was like, damn it, we're not really working on the same strategy here. I probably shouldn't have been following that advice. But I did sit down a few times. I actually know a ultra long distance, like 4,000 mile level distance cyclist. And he has a phrase in ultra long distance stuff where he says you should only ever have a 5-minute break or a 20-minute break. And you go into each break knowing what distance, what time it's going to be. I never really felt like I deserved a 20-minute break. So I would just go in and set myself a time, literally a timer. And 5 minutes is all I'm going to do, is to sit down, scoff some food, shake my legs out, and then get back up again. And I did that a few times. But on your point of getting started again, not only was that true when you're getting up from sitting, but also when you go from a walk to a run, because a natural strategy for long distance running, at my level at least, is to walk occasionally and have a split of walking and running. What I was telling people, we would often be walking together going, I can't get running, about 2 or 3 in the morning, where your whole body and every cell in your body wants to be asleep. We'd be moping around and they would be saying, I just can't get running, it's so painful. And I kind of created this idea of judge the pain in half a lap. So it is horrible going from walking to running at 2 in the morning when you've been running for 16 hours, but don't judge it in the first few steps, judge it in half a lap's time. So I tried to kind of share that idea with a few people as I was going around. That seemed to be a good mindset to have. Like, judge this on the other side of that track. You see that little tree over there? By the time you get to that, you'll feel okay. And that helped motivate me to pick up speed from a walk.
In terms of the numbers of people who did this particular race, how many was it that started? You did say in the video, I think.
I don't think I meant. 39 started it. 50 signed up. 39 started they were there on the day, and only 18 finished. And so 21 dropped out, over half dropped out.
Wow.
And many of them, I mean, this is the thing on a track where there's not that many people, you get to chat to everyone. And also you chat to people as they're leaving. And there were good people who have done multiple 100 miles where just the thought of being there through the night, it was tipping it down with rain. If something was going on in their mind or body, it just got them off the track. It was really hard.
Yes, I mean, that's incredible. Like you say, 50 sign up, 39 actually, so 11 didn't even make the start line, and then out of those 39, 18 finished. I think you said, yeah.
I came 17th, by the way.
Yeah,
I came 17th, penultimate last.
You picked it up at the end.
Yeah, but all those people, all those people who passed you to begin with and dropped out, it kind of, that's incredible. And it's interesting you say that, because I know it's not really comparable, but it is, maybe just to make it, I suppose, applicable for many of our listeners. We've spoke before about when you start a workout or something, and the first, couple of sets or the first couple of reps or the first exercise might not feel great, but it's kind of, you always feel better the more you do in a set, even if it's just a 1 hour gym workout. So it's not a 100-mile race, but I often say to people, well, get started, do warm up, do some stretching, do some mobility, do the first exercise, and then kind of your body and your mind will warm to the task, So I think that, that's just something that's applicable for everybody, not necessarily people who are going to go and do the 100 miles. One thing that's really interesting that you spoke about, or we've mentioned on the video, I think, was you got to about 90 miles and you mentioned that, over 20 odd people, 21 people pulled out, and you were like, it sounds like you were as close as you could have possibly been to pulling out. And
I was the closest.
So what kind of happened with you? Yeah, what happened with you at that sort of stage?
That was the closest I've ever come to quitting anything in my life, where I then didn't go on to quit. And it was so there's a phrase in ultra running that it never always gets worse. You tend to go through waves of feeling horrendous. So my waves were, I felt great for 50 to 60 miles. The daytime, I never really hit a bad spot. That gave me lots of confidence. Then my bedtime came along. I felt pretty horrendous, but then I started to get an uplift about an hour later. So I felt horrendous for an hour, then up again, and I was running pretty well again. Then by about 1:30 to 2 a.m., that's the point at which I said every cell in my body wanted to be asleep. Like my deep bones wanted to be asleep. And that continued from 2 a.m. all the way to 6 a.m. There was no up. And in hindsight, looking back on it, it's the middle of the night. There's not necessarily going to be an up. But when you're in it, when you're in 2 hours of misery, 3 hours of misery, 4 hours of misery, and it hasn't come back up again, your brain really starts to believe this is never coming back up again. This is me done. I remember going into this, everyone said what a mental challenge this was going to be. And my brain was telling me, no, this is actually physical. You've just gone down from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. This is getting worse and worse and worse. This isn't a mental challenge. This is just your physical body is not able to continue on. And all these thoughts were going on in my mind, like, some people are built for this stuff. You're just not tough enough. Some people are tough enough. You're not. And call it a day. 90 miles is all right. This has been a good training run. You're just not a 100-mile runner. And honestly, if I did quit at that moment, I don't think I would have tried again. I think I would have proven my point that I'm not a 100-mile runner. So the negative chat was just getting stronger and stronger and stronger in my mind. And it just felt so real that this was a physical barrier that I couldn't continue on through. My body felt knackered. There was another thread to this negative chat, which is there was a time cap on the run. And I was trying to do maths in my head, but my brain didn't work. And the negative state of mind I was in was telling me I wasn't going to finish within the time cap. So I might as well quit now. What you're doing here, just go home, start the recovery process, go home, see your kids. You can't do this, is what my brain was telling me.
What was the time cap that just out of interest for the 100?
25 hours.
25 hours. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I was trying to work out earlier. So a 400-meter track, is it around? It's around 400 times. It's 400 times around the track. Is that what it is?
403. Yeah.
Okay.
So they actually do it by laps as opposed to distance, because like my watch told me I'd run 104 miles because of all the deviations. Obviously there's a little bit of inconsistency with the GPS, but also all the deviations to the outside edge and not quite taking the inside line. So I ran probably 103, 104 miles, but they do it by it being 403 laps.
Wow.
I've got a question. So, because I did a walk once where I just got the train from Bath to Cheltenham and then walked back along the Cotswolds Way. It was like 72 miles or something. It took us 30 hours, but I had to get home. There was like, I couldn't just stop because I had to get home. And there's not really many train stations kicking around on the Cotswolds Way. But I did another one. This was 2 years ago, and there's a walk in Bath called the Skyline, and I figured out that 17 times around the Skyline is about 100 miles. And it was 17 years at the time since my dad had died of cancer. So I was like, I'll do it for cancer charity. I'll do it for local cancer place, Dorothy House, and I'll raise money for that and all that. So I did it 17 times, but that one was totally different because I could have stopped at any moment because it's literally, it's just there. So I could have just gone, all right, I'm finished now. But it's harder to do that. So on the track, obviously it's totally different because you can stop whenever you like. But when you're doing an ultra, you have to keep going, right? But my thing was, what made you? So for me, it was I raised a decent amount of money. I was like, I have to finish this. Otherwise, because people have put their money on this and kind of bet on me to do it, sort of thing. So I've got to do it. But you weren't doing it for charity or anything. So at 90 miles, when you wanted to give up, what was it that said, no, you've got to finish? What made you do it?
It's a really interesting question. That there's another phrase in ultra running that you experience a lifetime of emotion in a day. and it's so true. The emotions are so strong and the thoughts are so strong. There was just a little bit of me that knew I wasn't completely done. I knew that I could put one foot forwards. And that's something I'm questioning back about the DNF that did not finish back in June. I wasn't completely done then either, but that particular day, there were a few things going on. It was the hottest day of the year at the time. In my head, when things go terribly wrong, catastrophically wrong in long distance events, it's on very hot days. So there was a little bit of me that just wanted to be safe that day. But when I quit, I could have put another step forwards. And on this particular time, I just wanted to see what happens if I gave it everything and fully committed. My wife was texting me at the time and sending me messages from the kids, and that was just something where that was a real strong motivator. Like, I'm trying to be something for them, and that, I guess, was in the back of my mind. But the true answer to your question is, I don't know. I don't know. I would have loved to have quit.
Because you actually you kind of walked over to like the officials and stuff, and you were gonna, because I presume all you have to do is walk over and say, right, I've had enough, I'm giving up, and you hand in your chip or whatever it is, or and you just stop. So I think you actually walked over. And you were going to do that, weren't you? You were that close to doing it.
I knew I was going to make a YouTube video. I'd filmed. I was walking around the back edge of the track, and that was the next thing was the cabin where the crew were. And I was walking around the back edge, and I'd filmed. This is 90 miles. This is me done. I don't have the 100 in me, and that was genuinely. I'm on my way to quit. And I got there, and I put my hands on my knees, and I was just thinking. And I still couldn't do the maths. It still felt real that I wouldn't have finished in the time cap. But there was this voice going, you're just not completely done, are you? This isn't, you came here to find a limit. This isn't a limit. Whatever's going on isn't your limit. Just try, just give it everything. And then at least if you've given it everything and you still fail, you've given it everything. That was a little voice. I heard, maybe this is from the Chimp Paradox or another book, an analogy for the conversation between the subconscious and the conscious, and someone said it's like a little boy trying to tame a wild elephant. So the positive voice in my mind was a little boy, and the negative chat was this wild elephant rampaging through my brain. So there was so much negativity, and it was so strong. But there was this little voice going, yeah, but you're not done. So something else I'd said before this was, I've heard David Goggins quote the SEALs phrase, which is the Navy SEALs, which is when you think you're done, you're only 40% done. And I've done 7 or 8 ultras prior to this, and I could honestly say I've never even hit the 40%. I think that point for me at 90 miles, where I thought I was done, that was probably the 40% that he's talking about. It felt so real at 90. Then my wife was messaging me. I had this moment where I was standing there with my hands on my knees, and I just realized I'm not completely done. I need to commit. I need to try. Once I came to that conclusion and I started trying, I started to pick up pace. Then I started to feel quite a bit better. Then after 4 hours, I got the up that I'd been hoping for, and a couple of other things tied in with that. The sun started to rise, the light gave me energy, that made my tummy rumble. I hadn't been able to eat that much through the night because of probably my circadian rhythm just saying you shouldn't be eating. So I took another 2-minute sit down just to scoff as much food as I could scoff in 2 minutes, so that I had extra energy for the next 8 or 9 miles, and that gave me more energy. So it all started with the decision: you've got to commit to this. You've got to try your hardest. You haven't tried your hardest yet. And then sunlight helped, food helped, and actually at 100 miles, when I did eventually cross the finish line, I felt so much better than at 90 miles.
This was going to be I mean, that the boy taming the elephant thing, that's David versus Goliath, isn't it? It's like, it's age old, that sort of stuff, isn't it? It's like, it's been around, I've looked back through loads of like, old religions and philosophies and stuff like that. And it's all like similar stories, isn't it? Of, similar philosophies that have just gone in different tangents, I think. So the David versus Goliath is a big one on that. But I was going to ask you about the food, because again, at night, you just don't know what your body's like. What are you doing? Go to sleep. So how did that show up? And did it take you back to the last one you said? Because on the last one you said you were you had a 400 calories an hour or whatever it was, 350, 400 calories an hour. But after a certain amount of time, you couldn't get any more in because it just wasn't, because your body wasn't accepting it. And did that take your brain straight back to that time and go, oh, this has happened before, what do I do now, sort of thing?
It did a bit. Yeah, it did. It did cross my mind that, oh God, this is what happened to me last time. I couldn't take on food. At the same time, it never became too much of a stress. It just felt like, oh God, I just can't eat. And it's the nighttime that's done this to me. In hindsight, I should have done some nighttime training. I think it's trainable. I just didn't do any because I like my sleep too much. And I just, who would go out running at 2 a.m. if they don't have to? So I hadn't done any nighttime training. In hindsight, that was a mistake. If I wanted to do really well in this race and push a bit for a faster time and a better, more optimized strategy, I would have done some nighttime training at 2 or 3 times, gone out after a day's work and gone out trying to eat. And as always with ultra distance running, you're training your gut to take on food and certain types of food while you're running, just as much as you're training your running. So like I say, in hindsight, if I have another 100-mile race where I care more about my time and my position, or just want to increase my chances of finishing, I will do some nighttime training and really specifically focus on eating consistently through a nighttime run. I think it's probably trainable, but it was so powerful, the feeling of the circadian rhythm. Just my cells did not want me to be moving, and they did not want me to take on food.
This is what's massive. I mean, it's a broader subject, that, because obviously, a lot of our listeners will be, people who want to lose weight and get a bit fitter and a bit healthier and all of that, but not necessarily go to bed at a reasonable time and be, midnight snacking and stuff like that. So it's really interesting that you can be at your peak, like kind of performance, capability. That's the word I was looking for. So you're at your kind of peak performance capability, and you're going to test that, and it's still like that like, for someone who's not at their peak performance, nowhere near it, who's just about getting off the sofa, this is all affecting them as well. And just changing those sorts of things of going to bed early, drinking more water, eating proper food to fuel you, and all of that sort of stuff. It makes this kind of exacerbates that, because as soon as you were able to eat again, as soon as the sun came up, sunlight before screen light and all that, Huberman goes on about that all the time, doesn't it? As soon as that happened and you were able to get that food on board, you said, like, by the time you got to 100 miles, you felt better than you did at 90. So it's that's just like on a broader kind of way of thinking of it. That's the way my brain works anyway.
I was just going to ask Chris, with in regards to at 90, you like you say, your brain wasn't functioning properly, and you were you were doing the maths and you worked out, I can't finish in the time. What actually happened once you started moving again, and maybe the sun came up and you had something to eat? Did you recalculate and work out, actually, I can finish in time? I'd calculated incorrectly, and then that gave you, because you obviously you must have had some hope of success and hope of being able to do it, and then the hope would pull you forwards and help you through those last 10 miles. What happened with that? Did you recalculate and work out you'd made a mistake and you could do it?
Exactly that. And what I've realized is when people say something is a mental challenge, I knew going into this race it was going to be a tough mental day out. But what I didn't really know is how that presents itself. What does a tough mental challenge feel like? Because actually what a tough mental challenge feels like is it feels physical, or me not being able to do the maths and think that I was going to DNF at the end, I might as well DNF now. That was just another trick my brain was playing. That's part of the mental challenge, is to realize, yeah, that's just a trick your brain is playing. So the fact that I couldn't do the maths and I kept thinking I was going to fail, that was all wildly wrong. I ended up finishing in 24 hours 22 minutes, so I had well over half an hour to spare. So I did pick up the pace. But I didn't pick it up like half an hour difference. It was just my brain giving me an excuse to quit. And all of these reasons that were coming in, the fact that my physical body just felt completely battered, the fact that just the track was so miserable, I needed to get off that track, the fact that I wasn't going to finish in 25 hours, they were all just things that my brain was doing to me to try and make me quit.
I mean, that's huge, isn't it? Because loads of people have thoughts all the time and then they believe them and that's it. And it stops them doing what they want. And it's like, well, if you just don't believe them, what happens if you... Because that's the thing, when you were saying you were trying to figure it all out in there, that's using up more energy, obviously, and making you more tired. But also it doesn't matter. You just keep going, right? Because it'll be what it'll be at the end. You might have done 99 miles, but it's better than 90, isn't it?
That's the conclusion. Once I committed, once I was standing there with my hands on my knees and that voice just went, you're not completely done. You've got to try. Even though other voices, more negative voices, were louder, that was the conclusion I came to. I just got to try, and I'm just so pleased I did, and I'm so pleased I did do the 100. But even if I didn't, say I came in, like you say, at 98 miles, I would have. That's fine. I would have felt so different about the whole event than if I quit at 90. If I'd have kept running till 25 hours, really tried my best, and I did 98 miles, well, that's pretty good. That's a good day out. The fact that I didn't quit is really what matters to me the most.
We had David Keown on, who's a stone lifter these days, but when he was a kettlebell sport athlete, they're using 232s, long cycle. And he was saying that you got massive respect, especially from the Russians as well, if you manage the full 10 minutes. Doesn't matter how many reps you got. You could just stand there holding the bells, just like, I'm going to die. But like, as long as you got to the 10 minutes, that was what mattered, not the amount of reps. So I suppose it's kind of similar to that. You complete the 25 hours and you've done a certain amount. It doesn't matter if you complete the 100. It's like you've dug deep and got right to the end. So
yeah. There's a race in America, which I think is Western States. I might have it wrong. And the race finishes on a running track, and they call the final hour the golden hour. And all of the winners, or everyone who's run the race, all of their friends and family come and surround the track for the people that come in. I think there's a 30-hour time cap. So they all get there at hour 29, and they just cheer these people in. And there are people who are coming in at 29 hours 50 minutes, 29 hours 55, 29 hours 59, and they're just cheering people in. Then there's a few people that don't quite make it, so they haven't technically run the run, but they're still getting cheered in, because that's just, I mean, it's amazing that some people can finish that race in 18 hours compared to 30. But it's so amazing that some people are just trying and keeping on going for the full time cap, and not giving up. And I
thought you were going to say they're cheering everyone coming in, and then as soon as it gets to 30 hours, they just go. And everything goes quiet. That'd be brilliant.
Oh,
yeah.
It's interesting. We had week before last, we had a guy on, Anthony Flores from the States, and one of the quotes that I shared the other day that he sort of said was, stop listening to yourself and start talking to yourself. And he spoke about, and it's a similar, another way of describing that, all those, the kind of the negative voices, or the negative voice, the overwhelming negative voice that's coming in at you. It's kind of, so many people, they hear that voice. And I mean, especially the way that you were at 90 miles, having that negative voice, the amount of willpower to kind of, to stand up to that voice, I suppose. Do you feel that, was that a subconscious voice, was the negative voice, and was it another kind of subconscious voice that was the little boy that was talking you out of quitting, or were you consciously trying to overpower the negative voice? What do you think was going on in your brain there?
It feels like the negative was subconscious, and there was a little bit of conscious power left to try and talk myself back into it.
Yeah.
But I've felt since the race, I've had I call it an afterglow. I've had such a sense of achievement. I'm so pleased I did it. And the lessons in this 100 mile, they were so stark, and they sound very specific lessons. They sound very specific to running 100 miles around a track is a very weird thing to do, but it's a very niche thing. But the lessons you learn just carry over into everything. And this is probably the two biggest lessons I've taken are, one is your barriers aren't real. They will present in a real way. They will present as a physical limitation. They'll present as a maths problem, like you don't have the time to do this. And actually they're just illusions. And then the other lesson I've had is just how the negative chat is just a story that your mind creates, probably to try and protect you. And you need to harness something, find that positivity, and then just try and ignite that. I think by doing very hard challenges from time to time, no matter what it is, physical endeavors help teach you this stuff, and then it carries over into other areas of your life. Like running a business is hard, being a parent is hard, being alive in the modern world is hard. So when we do really hard things in an acute format, of sharp format, we then learn the lessons that actually carry over into the more chronic format of just being alive. And I think these lessons, because they're so exaggerated in these physical endeavors, then your day-to-day life is, oh well, I ran 100 miles last week. It's not going to be that bad. And,
that's really interesting, because it's one of those things as well. If you try and explain it to somebody, it's not even like running 100 miles, but just doing something to test yourself in that way, and then try and explain it to somebody, it's really hard to explain. That's why I asked that question of like, what kept you going at 90 miles? And you're like, I don't know, I just did it. And there'll be a reason deep down somewhere, but you just can't quite grasp it, but it's there. And trying to explain that to somebody is really difficult, rather than just saying, just go and do it. Just go and do something that you're really uncomfortable with, and just go and do it. And then tell me. And it'll be one of those things, I think, where the person would then come back and go, I know what you mean, right? Explain it to me. I can't, but now we understand each other, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? I'm asking if you know what I mean, but might be one of the things that, yeah, but I can't explain it.
So one thing I would say to people starting out is your mindset is trainable in the same way your physical body is trainable. I've had many people say to me, there's no way I could do that. I'm not mentally tough enough. And I say, I know, it's because you haven't tried yet. And you haven't done the 5K. And when you get to your 5K, you do your 10K. And when you do, if we use a running example, could be anything. But if we're using a running example, once you got your 10K, you might want to try a half marathon. By the time you start going up the distance, every single next step is scary. And you just about cope with it. While you're coping with that, you also learn nutrition strategies, you learn training strategies, you learn recovery strategies. Sometimes you get it wrong. And when you make mistakes, that hurts. And then you learn something about how you deal with pain and discomfort, and you have to solve problems. And that will teach you and give you more mental resilience. It's failed earlier this year. This was my second 100-mile attempt. I learned so much that first time. So for someone to listen to someone who's ahead of them in the journey, it's easy for them to think, I can't do that. I'm not tough enough. And of course, that's okay, because you haven't built up gradually bit by bit, and you build your mental toughness as you build your physical fitness, and you build your training strategies, and you build your recovery strategy. They all grow together. So never be put off by, or never feel inferior to people who are slightly further ahead in the journey. The other thing to remember is I did achieve the 100 miles and I didn't feel tough enough.
That mental thing, when you say, people say, oh, I haven't got the mental toughness to do that. There's a thing, like a group I'm part of, and they talk about, like, the story you tell is the truth you know. Like, if you tell that, then you won't be mentally strong enough. However, if you flip that story and say, well, I am, then you will be. So using me as an example, I think I'm mentally tough enough to run 100 miles, or at least go for it and all that sort of stuff. I just don't want to.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's the other thing, isn't it? A lot of people will say, I could never do that, or I'm not mentally tough enough, just so they don't have to, be almost like to shut that possibility off. Because like you say, it's a niche thing that is, and it is, I'm going to say, Chris, it's pretty weird, to run 100 miles around a 400-meter track. Not many people. There must be, it's probably 0.0000001 of the population would do something like that. But like you say, it's not really about the running 100 miles around the 400-meter track, is it? It's about gradually progressing and gradually expanding your horizons and what you. And I think that one of the biggest things is that now. One of the big reasons I wanted to get you back on was because I think it's such a brilliant story, and it's such a inspiring and empowering story of you did try and do this and it didn't work out, and you've gone back and you've done it, and now you've done it. But now that you've done it once, I dare say if you were to go and do another 100-miler or 150-miler or whatever the next challenge is going to be, which we'll ask about in a minute, you've got that belief that you can do it. So when you approach it next time, it's going to be different, isn't it? You've kind of, you can do it now, which again is a massive confidence booster for life and for these sort of things going forwards.
Yeah, honestly, that moment at 90 miles was really quite a profound thing for me. And to push through I feel more gratitude for pushing through at 90 miles than I do for finishing the 100 and saying I've run 100 miles. Like that, pushing through what felt like such a real barrier at the time, to then move on a little bit longer and then feel, oh, I'm actually all right. And to have such a long period of time from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. where I was just progressively getting worse and worse, to the point where, oh, this must be real. This isn't coming back up again. But then to come out the other side, that is such a good lesson to have, that there just is more in the tank. And sometimes bad times do last quite a long time, but just keep going. If you're not done, then you can keep going. That was a really powerful lesson that will certainly help me in future endeavors. I have been left with a paradox though, because now I'm a couple of weeks out of the event. I've already got rose tinted glasses about it. I've already forgotten how bad that was at 4 to 6 a.m. But what I was saying at the time when it was fresh was, God, that was so miserable. But I literally cried tears of joy on the finish line because it was so miserable, because it was so hard and the barrier felt so real. But I got through. I was crying on the finish line, which has never happened before. And I've never felt so joyful because things have never been so hard. So the real paradox is, do I want the nice daytime ultras where you're out for 10, 11 hours and you do your hard run? It's still not easy, but you do your hard run, then you get back to your hotel and you go to bed. Or do I want the really tough, miserable, really dark times? But then if you can get through them, you cry tears of joy on the finish line. So I'm still deciding what's next and where I want to go with it.
Excellent. So what's
That's interesting, because it seems like you get more out of the dark ones, doesn't it? But it's like, oh, really?
I know.
You just have to go to hell and back, don't you, to get the joy?
James said you're a bit weird, but we were talking about before we started recording, I don't know if James was going to get to this, but there's that other one, isn't there? The tunnel.
Oh yeah.
That's for proper weirdos, isn't it?
So from the same race director, Mark Cockbain, he's well known for trying to get you stuck in your head. So that's why on this race, you weren't allowed headphones, you weren't allowed a crew. And he's also developed a race called the Tunnel, which is 200 miles in a tunnel, which is a half-mile tunnel. And you do 400 up, down through the tunnel, which would be a really, I must admit, I'm intrigued by it.
I was going to ask: is there somewhere in the deep recesses of your mind that thinks, "Oh, I'd quite fancy giving that a go at some stage"?
Is there a time cap on that one?
There is, and I can't remember what it is. 50 hours or something, which is not slow. So I
was going to say, because that's double it's not like you were saying, you got to 50 miles and you're like, oh, I could do it in less than 20. It's like people who do a half marathon and go, well, I did it in less than 2 hours, so I could do a marathon in 4 hours. That's
maybe
like
it's
deluding
54
yourself.
hours.
So 100 and 200 miles is like, it's huge.
It is. I can't remember the time cap. Don't quote me on it. It might be 54 or something. But I've been interested in meditation for a long time, and I've been interested in the nature of mind. And I really do use physical endeavors to teach me about my mind and my spirit. And that is where 200 miles in a tunnel or 100 miles around the track, that it intrigues me. I also love having the fitness to explore big parts of nature. I love running in the mountains. I love looking at the beautiful vistas of nature. But with something like a track or a tunnel, you take that away. There's only one thing left to explore, and that's the nature of your consciousness. And I find that interesting, and have done for a long time with meditation as well. So maybe that's why I'm drawn to these things.
Because I wonder if if you actually thought that, and I know it would be different because you've done it now once and you know you can, but getting to the end of 100-mile run that you just did, and then thinking you had to start all over again and do another 100 at the end of the first time. I know you frame the mind differently because you frame it differently because you know you're going to do 200 before you start. And effectively, when you get to the 100-mile mark, it's the same as getting to the 50-mile mark on the 100. But it's still that is
you can never say how you're going to feel. But what I was surprised about in the track 100 is the track 100 is very much a numbers game. I even had a clicker that I was counting. So I looked at my clicker more than I looked at my watch, and I knew that I had to do 403 laps. Going into the run, I didn't know whether the clicker and the numbers were going to be motivating, or were they going to be scary. Like if I just clicked lap 80 and I'm thinking, God, I've got 320 to go. How was I going to feel about that? What was interesting was, at no point did I really care. At no point did I actually care about numbers. 50 miles. I guess I had a little glance to go, oh yeah, 10 hours. That's a pretty good time if I double that. So I was thinking about it, but I was thinking quite neutrally about it. It didn't scare me, but it didn't really uplift me. There was no point where the numbers really mattered. And having judged how I felt during the track 100, I would guess that during a tunnel 200, you're just thinking, how am I going to keep moving forwards until I'm done? And that's how I felt. So this is also true at 90 miles. I didn't think it's only 10 miles left. I was thinking, this is how I feel right now. I can't do it. The numbers didn't affect me the way I thought they would. So who knows with a different race and a different environment, but I would guess the tunnel, the 200, it would just be well, you're not finished yet, keep going.
What country is that in the tunnel? Is that in this country or?
Yes, in this country. I can't remember where. Midlands, I think.
Right. Okay. Wow. What we'll do, Chris, we'll start to wrap up. I mean, it has been incredible. And it really made me think when you were talking about stopping with the hands on the knees and you were literally seconds away from kind of throwing in the towel, as it were. It made me think of the old Rocky movies, like after he's been knocked down and he's on the canvas, and then you get all these kind of, I suppose, what goes through his mind and different things from his past coming up, and then he causes him just to stand up and carry on. It really just felt like that. And then when, like you say, when you made the decision of I'm not quitting, I'm going to go on, you immediately, the second almost you made that decision, you started to move again, and you almost started to feel better because you'd made that decision to carry on. But I mean, it's been incredible just hearing. I suppose it's more like you say, more than the physical, the journey that you went on mentally, emotionally, spiritually, everything over the course of that 24 hours and 22 minutes, I think you said. Yeah, it's incredible. Pete, have you got anything you'd like to say as we kind of wrap up?
I just think this has been brilliant, because the 3 episodes we've done with you, Chris, have been great, because we didn't know any of this was going to happen, right? So it was like the first episode, you were like, yeah, I like going running, and I got into ultra marathon running, and I've been doing some long runs and that. And I'm going to do 100
miles. I think we were going to talk about a bit of rehabby stuff, weren't we? And then...
Well, yeah. Oh, he's a physio, isn't he? He's like, yeah, we'll talk about that. But no, exactly. So that's what I love about doing this podcast. It goes anywhere. But then this has turned into like an amazing story. and it's like we've been watching it unfold, and I just love it. I love it. So thank you very much.
It's been honestly, it's been interesting being playing out this story this year, this calendar year, to have really tried my hardest, to have failed on the first attempt, to have thought I'd leave it for a while, to walk into a coffee shop, to not really train quite as optimally as I would have hoped, to turn up a bit underprepared, but actually feeling pretty good, and then to do it. And it's been really cool.
Do you ever say to the missus, I'm just going to nip out and get a coffee? She's like, stop there, I'll make you one. You're not doing anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Chris, you were saying just before we came on that you're putting quite a lot of effort at the moment into your YouTube and things like that, which is where we saw this great video you just put out a couple of days ago. So if people do want to, I mean, there's obviously different avenues and stuff for people, but if YouTube is something that you're focusing on a bit at the moment, what's your YouTube for people to go? Because your videos you put out are fantastic. I mean, I'll say, they're really, really thoughtfully done, really well produced, look great. They're really interesting, really well done. So I mean, what's your YouTube for people to follow?
Thank you. YouTube is Chris Branch, and just search Chris Branch, you'll find me. That I'm trying to share information to help people get into running and to run a bit further. That's including, I share my adventures. So if I ever do something big, I put that there, but I also share tips and strategies in my other videos. To contact me, you can get in touch through Instagram, and it's Chris_Branch_. And they're my two platforms that I really pay attention to. But YouTube is where I'm putting the most effort in terms of production value and trying to share ideas to help people.
Excellent. I've got one. It's not a criticism.
Go for it.
Right. You did a 100-mile run and all of that. We've just had a chat about it, and there's even more we could talk about it. And you did an 8-minute video on it. You could do a longer.
People's attention spans, unfortunately.
Well, yeah. Well, it's just funny. You kind of condensed it all in 8 minutes, and we just had a massive chat about it, which has opened up all these other avenues that you could talk about. So yeah.
One of my next videos, I've got 2 videos in the pipeline. One that's being edited right now called 5 Reasons You Can't Run Further. So that's going to help people build up their distance. And then the next video is going to be things I wish I knew before running 100 miles. And it's going to talk about my journey from DNFing to completing it and things I wish I knew, some of which we haven't actually spoken about today because they were off on a bit of a tangent. But there are some things that in hindsight could have really helped me the first time round, which I didn't know, and now I do. So there will be more to talk about from that 100-mile that will be coming out in future videos.
Good.
Brilliant. And I know that we had Mark Lewis on, didn't we? Well, I was just thinking actually.
Oh, did you?
Probably. Yeah, we should. It was funny. I was thinking the other day we should maybe try and catch up with Mark Lewis, but we did a double episode with him. And he's, just the way your videos are done and the kind of the way your YouTube channel is obviously growing and is building. I mean, he's obviously really prolific on YouTube, isn't he? And he's been doing it for quite a while now and has really got a massive reach and everything else. But yeah, it just kind of reminded me the quality, the quality of production and everything you're putting into your videos sort of reminded me of the stuff that Mark Lewis does, which is, he's an interesting guy.
Mark Lewis is an inspiration for me from both a health perspective and a YouTube perspective. Although we've got different setups, his videos are talking head and breaking down what he's done, and that I've been inspired by that. That's how I've been modeling my videos. So yeah, I'll go back and listen to his episodes.
Yeah, I was going to say go back because we had quite a long conversation with him, and I think we split it into 2 episodes because he was on with us for a couple of hours, I think. But he was really good, so that's great.
Nice.
No, well done. The videos are fantastic, and like I say, highly recommend people. Certainly subscribe to the YouTube channel, and like you say, check out Instagram as well. So no, thank you. Thanks everyone for listening, guys. I mean, this is fantastic. We've got next week episode 172. I think we've got another kind of 2 guest one. We've got Dan, John, and Tim Anderson on with us next week. You're looking, Pete, that is correct, isn't it? I thought you were looking. We've got Dan.
No,
Good. We've got Dan, John, and Tim Anderson on next week with us. So Dan, obviously, I think it'll be his 7th visit with us, and Tim, it'll be Tim from Original Strength. It'll be his 2nd time with us, but they're coming over to England next year together to do something. So they're going to be on with us next week talking. But thank you so much again for listening. We really appreciate it. And like I say, we do have some new listeners and watchers who have joined us recently. So welcome to everyone who is new to the podcast. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave a review if you're watching or listening on a platform that allows you to do so. Please do. I mean, we'd like to get some more YouTube subscribers as well. So go onto YouTube, give us a subscribe, and go on to healthoddity.com to check out every single episode, all 171 episodes in visual and audio. We will, I'm sure, catch up with Chris again in the future, and we'll certainly have him back on when he's done the 200-mile tunnel down the line. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks, guys. It's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed all 3 of them. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pete. And we will see you next week with Dan and Tim. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.